Hi everyone, welcome to the Making the Big Move in-house webinar. It's a session today. We've got a panel here of 3 senior in-house lawyers and a couple of in-house recruitment specialists. And hopefully we're going to talk about all the things that you need to consider if you are planning on making the move in-house, or any of the things that are to bear in mind for that move that you can make. So planning the session, we've got a couple of topics we're probably going to cover. We'll get everyone on the panel talking about a couple of these subject areas. We're going to operate a poll as well now, which we'll send out. But if everyone who's logged on and watching can post their answers onto the poll, it's going to be on whether or not you're thinking about making the move in-house. So we've got a couple of options. First one being yes, within the next year or so. Second one being yes, within the next 5 years. Third one being not sure. And the fourth one being definitely not. If it is definitely not, it'd be good to get some comments as to the considerations there as to why people aren't interested in making that move. And hopefully we can either answer or confirm or deny some of those suggestions as well going forward. We'll get that poll live now. And so if you can just pop on and answer that as well, that'd be great. What it'd also be good to do, if anyone has got any questions, just pop them in the comments area. And what we'll do is we'll spend some time at the end talking through those questions and providing any advice that we possibly can as well. I think in terms of introductions, so I'll introduce myself and then each of the panel members will introduce themselves as well. So by way of my introduction, I'm Tom Bagley. I head up the in-house legal recruitment team here at Douglas Scott. We cover in-house legal recruitment nationally. We've been, I've been with the business for coming up to 6 years now, so have 6 years experience in this field and hopefully can provide a bit of an oversight as to what the challenges are and some of the things that make a good in-house move, or how to make that in-house move as best as possible. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. My name's Andrew Williams. I'm an Australian-trained solicitor. I've worked in private practice in Australia, moved to the UK in 2002, and I'm currently the Deputy Director with the Government Legal Department, currently working in the Department for Transport Legal Advisors. I joined GLD, what was formerly the Treasury Solicitor's Office, in 2007, so been here for about 15 years, just coming on 15 years. And I'm pretty much a genuine public lawyer these days. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Juliet, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, you're on mute, I think, Juliet.
See, one of those schoolgirl errors and one of the lessons that we should have learnt during the pandemic, but there we go. So I'm Juliet Johnson. I am currently a group senior legal counsel for the Hempel Group. I made the decision to train in-house given the greater rights of audience. I did a number of placements, but decided that being very close to the business was something that particularly interested me. So in-house was the route. And we'll come on to this a bit later, but it was a decision when to go in-house. I wanted greater rights of audience because I wanted to be a litigator at that time. However, having done my training contract, decided that it wasn't really for me, but the breadth then introduced me to projects. And I've dealt with a number of projects, including international projects, launching projects in Europe, and currently just starting my 5th day at a new company, the Hempel Group.
Great. Thanks, Juliet. Javan.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Javan. I'm currently legal counsel at JD Sports Fashion PLC. I actually trained in the public sector. I trained at a mixture of Trafford Council and a housing association called RBH. So I did a bit of housing and commercial. I then moved into in-house. I worked at a telecoms company for 2 years. I've been at JD since January this year. And prior to that, I actually worked at Bimpto for a period of time as well.
Great. Thanks, Javan. And Nick, last but not least.
Thanks, Tom. Nick Barras, a colleague of Tom's at Douglas Scott, so senior consultant for in-house legal for close to the past 10 years now. So have experienced insight of watching some of these career journeys of people who have either trained in-house or have made the move in-house at some point and gone on to great things. So hopefully be able to import as to some of the things I've seen.
Great, thanks, Nick. So I suppose we'll start up by opening the panel discussion. And I think one of the big questions that we often get asked is there a perfect background to make that move in-house? And I think we've got a panel here with lots of varying degrees of experience, so it'd be good to get their opinions on whether there is a perfect background. But if I open that up, and Juliet, if you'd like to sort of provide your opinion on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I don't think there's any perfect background to move in-house. One of the things that I've found during my time is that there are lots of different in-house operations. So one of the key things is making sure that you understand the organisation and that you also have an appreciation for what type of lawyer they're looking for. Are they looking for a lawyer that's going to come in and provide answers and solutions, or are they looking for a lawyer that's just going to give them the black letter of the law and then leave it to the business to make a decision? Frequently, if you're the type of lawyer that wants to be there and help the business make solutions, I'd suggest that it's that soft skills and the ability to work collectively. If your background is such that you want to be part of that broader experience, I'd then say that that wouldn't be the right organisation. But one thing that I have found is that breadth of experience is a benefit to moving in-house or having the ability to look at new areas.
Okay, great. And Javan, what are your thoughts on the perfect background to making that move?
I mean, I think I agree with kind of Juliet's thoughts. I don't think there's a perfect background. I think particular backgrounds might suit particular roles. So I think if you are looking at making the move in-house, it's kind of making sure that particular company has the same structure or is in the sector that suits your experience or where you see yourself moving forward. So I think anybody with any background can be an asset to a particular business, but it's just finding the right one that suits you, really.
Yeah, great. And Andrew, have you got many thoughts on that, or is it something you've come across, obviously?
Very similar. So I won't repeat what Julian and Javan said. I think certainly from the government legal perspective, people are coming to government legal for various different reasons. I don't think there's a perfect background to be a good public lawyer. But I think having a passion for public service is something that is obviously really helpful. I think helps you to succeed, helps you to enjoy the work. But we certainly look to find people's strengths and skills when we're allocating work, and we try and find people that best fit the type of roles that they want to do. So no, definitely not a perfect type of background that would make you a better or worse public lawyer. I think it's just coming into the GLD with a good attitude and a passion for public law. Great,
sounds good. Nick, you obviously see it from a slightly different perspective. You're from recruitment, and you'll see lots of people making those moves, and there's probably trends that you see as well. But what does it look like to you?
I think the biggest factor that most people consider, and there's probably no right answer here, but it's just the most important thing to find when people are trying to make the move in-house is still the support structure and the training and the environment, I think. So we can talk about all the different sectors that the guys have touched upon there, but I think one of the biggest considerations is that people have confidence that there's a team and a structure there in terms of training and opportunity. We've probably seen a few mistakes ourselves in the past where people have gone for things at too early a level of PQE. They sounded great, but actually when they get into a business, the business just wanted a lawyer to throw some work out and didn't really care about PQE and things like that. So I think background-wise doesn't really matter. I think environment is the big key, and they need to be perfect on that when they're making the move.
Great. Andrew, actually, a quick question, because I had a couple of people approach me prior to this session who've come from international backgrounds. Did you find that there was any challenges coming in from an international background into the UK legal market or not?
So this is quite a while back, so we're talking 20 years ago now, so things may have changed slightly. I think those coming from Antipodean backgrounds, New Zealand, Australia, I think to a certain extent South Africa, find the transition less onerous. I mean, certainly the Australian and New Zealand systems are based on common law systems, and so there isn't a huge difference in the processes and procedures. There's obviously the minor differences. So I didn't find it too difficult, and certainly I can only really talk from the GLD aspect. One of the benefits of joining GLD is that you don't have to have gone through the professional training in the UK in order to work within GLD. You sit under the Treasury Solicitor's mandate, and so we quite frequently have Aussie and Kiwi lawyers who aren't necessarily trained here come in and work, and then they can make a decision while they're working for us whether or not they want to take that next step. So if you want to become a permanent lawyer, you then have to do the local qualifications. No, I found the transition relatively straightforward, and the feedback I've had from most people from my sort of background from Australia and New Zealand has been that it hasn't been too difficult. I think if you're coming from a jurisdiction which is very different to the UK, you might find maybe the transition a little bit tougher. But I certainly haven't encountered anyone in GLD that's found it really, really difficult to make a transition from an overseas territory.
Okay, great. We just had a quick question from Shakiba, just asking what are the specific requirements to move. Shakiba, if you just want to ask, is it the specific requirements to move to the UK, or is it specific requirements to move in-house? We'll get the guys to answer that at the end. Thank you. So if we move on to the next topic, I think there's a lot of questions around in-house roles and whether they're all the same and are there differences between them. So it'd be good to get everyone's ideas on the panel as to whether they are the same or whether there are different types of roles that everybody can take on in the in-house legal sector. Javan, maybe ask you first. What sort of different roles do you see typically?
So all roles are not the same. I think it does depend on what sector you're in. I think it depends on what level you're in, and I think it depends on the structure of the particular company that you're looking to work for or that you're looking at. So I've seen quite a lot more specialist roles come available recently. I'm talking more tech specialist, data protection, privacy, that sort of element. I'd say the majority of the roles are kind of general commercial, so it's kind of a broad spectrum of commercial agreements that you're probably expected to look at. But it can just depend on what that particular business needs. You know, some are now looking for employment lawyers, which might have not been the case 4 or 5 years ago when I was qualifying. So I think there is definitely a moving trend depending on kind of, you know, how the market requires it.
Okay, great. And Juliet, what do you tend to see? Because you've obviously had quite a few different roles in the past as well. So good to get your input.
Yes, so over my time, I've seen the point Javan was making, that there's an increasing request for specialist lawyers. So data protection is one of the key areas, IT, software, but there's been an increasing trend regarding financial services. One of the things that people may have seen more recently is the number of payment services providers, and there's a real growth in the business. So lawyers that have financial services experience are one of the areas that a number of in-house roles are coming up for. The other area that I am also seeing come up is project lawyers. So a large number of in-house businesses have got projects where they're looking to either branch out overseas or they're looking at transformation projects. And one of the things that they've identified is that in-house lawyers can provide support and assistance using legal skills and soft skills as well. So there's then been an increasing trend to look at bringing in interim lawyers as well as having your full-time employees as an in-house lawyer.
Yeah. And you've done some interim work in the past, haven't you? You've done some contracting positions.
I have. Yes, so I did 4 years as a contracts lawyer. So worked for a number of businesses, and that gave me a real insight into the fact that there's a very wide range of in-house legal setups, to the point made earlier that there are no two setups that are completely alike, and some of the skill sets that they're looking for will vary dependent on the organisation and where it is within its evolution. It might be that they're looking for people who can bring more than just legal skills, bring really kind of the soft skills to play about the collaboration and helping colleagues to work more effectively together on multi group projects from different continents as well.
Great. We'll touch on that as well later, because I know it's quite a big part of that move in-house. But Andrew, obviously you're in a slightly different role from your traditional in-house position as well. So good to get your thoughts on the different types of in-house roles that you see as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the differences with GLD is we also have the litigation function. So it's maybe a little bit different to in-house roles because it is a different function, and the litigation function provides mainly public law advice, but there's also private law and commercial advice, national security, those sorts of things. So litigation is a big part of GLD. And on the advisory side, I think it's fair to say that the majority of roles are in the public law sphere. So policy advice, statutory instrument drafting and advice on statutory instruments and bills, making law. But then we have specialist areas which are commercial and procurement. We have an employment function, and we also have a data protection function. And we also have centres of excellence around different topic areas, all of which have completely gone out of my head right now. I do apologise. I might think about it at some point. But just within DFT legal advisors, we have the rail franchises teams, and that they're two separate teams that do pretty much procurement and commercial. And so we do have a specialism there. So those lawyers wouldn't be doing the sort of work that I'm doing, so sort of general public law. But they do. There is that sort of difference in approach and a different skill set that's needed. And so those sorts of positions would be advertised separately. But generally, when you come into GLD, you'll find yourself going into an advisory role, general public law, and there might be other bits and pieces that you might need to think about, employment or data protection, but they can be farmed out, for want of a better word, to our specialist teams. Then there's the litigation side of things, and then there's that procurement commercial sphere.
Great. And just for anyone,
really good points about the specialisms that have existed, or certainly exist nowadays, and the fact that in the Northwest a few years ago, you just wouldn't see some of these in-house roles around employment or some specialists around data protection, or even some transition we're seeing from Andrew's environment, from GLD, with the guys who've got framework and public procurement experience, and that being sought after in sort of quasi-private businesses. So the variety that's moved outside of London over the past probably 10 years is massive, and has opened up so many more options.
Great. It's interesting that, because Anuradha, who's watching, has asked, why are many in-house roles contracts or procurement based? Is this the case with all of them? So it's interesting that we've raised it there. We've talked about different areas, but we'll answer that in more detail at the end as well. Nick, what do you tend to see wider in terms of your traditional in-house roles as well?
Wider than just commercial contracts?
Yeah.
So we touched on a couple there. Some of the specialisms underneath that around data protection and IP that exist in-house now, and perhaps in the past. We've mentioned employment and where that might get you to. We obviously have the more traditional roles in corporate and construction and real estate that all exist. So there's very few areas now in what you might class as lawyers that act for businesses who can't move in-house at some point. Most of those options, including commercial litigation, have routes to get in-house now, whereas perhaps they were very limited in the past.
Yeah. I think from my perspective as well, we tend to see you've got a panel here with all ranging different experiences, but they're all working in different businesses as well. So you get in-house lawyers in retail, you've got in-house lawyers in manufacturing, you get in-house lawyers in technology. Any business that is big enough to spend enough on their external legal counsel will start considering bringing lawyers in-house as well. And I think there's some differences between those roles, but maybe something for everybody to discuss a little bit later on as well, which is good. So moving on to the next topic, what can a future in-house career look like? And I'll open that up to Javan.
I think it's quite structured in a sense. I mean, the structure will differ from business to business, but it's quite structured in terms of, you know, you have maybe your NQ, junior legal counsel level. You go to about, that's usually tends to be about 0 to 2 years PQE. Once you reach 2 years to 4 years, it's kind of legal counsel. So that's kind of my role. After that, you'll get like a senior legal counsel, where sometimes tend to look for like 5 to 8 years PQE. And then it kind of differs from business to business. After that element, so you might have a head of legal, you might have a legal director, but then kind of the top role is kind of tends to be kind of general counsel. So it's quite structured, and you can see where you need to get to in particular businesses, but it just depends if that structure is there. So at JD, my structure is pretty clear. You know, we have NQs, we have legal counsel, senior legal counsel, head of legal, assistant GC, and then GC. But at Vimto previously, there's just a legal counsel and then a general counsel or legal director. So there's a bit of a gap there in terms of that might be a bit unclear for people how you progress from legal counsel stage to kind of being a legal director. So I think, again, it just depends on where you're looking and what that structure is there.
Yeah, great. And obviously, Juliet, you'll have a different perspective on things. What does a future in-house career look like from you?
So from my perspective, the future in-house career is one that's as varied as the people wanting to become an in-house lawyer. One of the things that you will find is it will depend on the size of the organisation as regards whether it actually has the structure that Javan's just mentioned. Increasingly, one of the things that I've noticed is that as businesses need to become leaner, one of the things that they look to do is make sure that the in-house function is as lean as possible as many other functions. But what that can mean is that you don't necessarily get an organisation where you would be able to progress all the way through within one organisation. I think one of the things that you'll tend to find, or I've seen in the Northwest when speaking with some colleagues, is that if they're looking for a move, sometimes it's a sideways move, which then gives them broader breadth of experience and the opportunity to then manage teams, to then be able to make the next step up, so to speak. I think one of the things that I've increasingly seen is a real mix as regards the experience that they're looking for within a team. It isn't necessary that they will have the ability to be able to provide training contracts, whereas you'll get other organisations that can provide training contracts and then will look to keep that trainee on once they've qualified. Sometimes it will be necessary to move to a new organisation to secure the next move up. And then one of the things I've also noticed from an international side is that where you're working with companies whose head office might be in another country, the actual structure and titles that they have for their legal teams are different.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that in-house career and the progression path that people can take?
Yeah, again, from the GLD perspective, I think you can look at quite a varied career within GLD. Just in terms of structure, you would probably, assuming that you're coming in sort of towards at the lower end of the hierarchy, you'd come in as a grade 7 civil servant as a junior lawyer or just a lawyer, and depending on where you are, there's the expectation or the encouragement in GLD is that you get a breadth of experience. So people don't tend to stay in their role for longer than 4 years. So it could mean that you'll be in Department of Transport one post, and then you'll be at the Ministry of Defence for your next post. It's that varied. So you can expect that variation in work, and you get that broad experience across the government. In terms of progression, the next step up is to a grade 6 lawyer. I think at the moment that would almost certainly mean that you would be taking on a line management function. There are some roles in government, there's no doubt about that, grade 6 roles that don't require line management, but I think you would be expecting that if you're stepping up to grade 6, you'd start managing junior lawyers. Then the next step up is where I am at the moment, which is deputy director, which is leading a function within a division. So in DFT, I'm leading one of the roads teams. And then legal director leads the division. So we have a legal director of DFT, legal advisors. And then you step up to the Treasury Solicitors type level, so DG, Director General type level. So that's, sort of in the future, obviously. So yeah, I think in GLD, you are looking at a varied practice. You could be doing litigation one moment, national security work the next moment, providing policy advice on trains the next moment, and then providing policy advice on soldiers working in foreign countries, for example. So, it's a very varied workload, and you will get a wide range of experience. I think it's fair to say nobody joins GLD for the money. I probably should put that out there. So the way that we make it worth everybody's while is that there is a really wide range of experiences that you can get, and you get that opportunity to move around and to try different things. And also we encourage people to make that application for progression as soon as we feel confident that they're ready to step up. So while there is a hierarchy, it's certainly not the case that you need to have had particular PQE before you can apply for a grade 6 role. It's really whether or not you're ready, whether or not you meet the criteria, which is generally around leadership, legal professional skills, communication, those sorts of things, rather than how long you've been a lawyer.
Great. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, but I think we tend to see, like Javan says, that most in-house environments are well structured at the junior end. Whether or not they give training contracts and have NQs qualifying with them, they'll certainly have junior legal counsel positions. Most have the opportunity for senior legal counsels, and then depending on size, there may be head of legals and assistant general counsels. I think after that, it starts to get a bit interesting in-house. A lot more specialism come into play. People may go down company secretarial routes or corporate governance. They may take their skills like Juliet did for a few years and become a contractor and just do interim assignments with different bits and pieces. And I think from there, there's also in-house the opportunity to take on those wider commercial roles that might be non-legal, that might draw on the legal skills that in-house lawyers have had, but take them into other areas. And I suppose some examples of those are just going and being an out-and-out commercial director, or a director of a business. If you've been in-house there and learned that environment, you may step up to the board in that business and relinquish some of the legal responsibilities. The COO positions, some NED stuff that you could do outside of that, and even some, I suppose, practice area specific stuff. So we know examples ourselves, Tom, of employment solicitors becoming more heads of HR or heads of employee relations and things like that. So once you've got that experience in-house, the route starts to open up a little bit outside of legal, which probably does speak to the fact that some of the work you tend to start doing in-house as you get more experienced is less legal sometimes and more business, commercial and strategic and things like that. So a really interesting path, I think, once you've got your feet under the table of an in-house career.
Great, thanks, Nick. So I'll move on to the next topic as well. And this is probably one for people to discuss, but we've got different backgrounds here. So what would you say are the main differences between working in-house and working in private practice? And I'll ask this, some of the guys on the panel haven't necessarily worked in private practice, but they've maybe worked with people who've come from private practice backgrounds. So it'd be good to get their opinions on what colleagues have said and what the differences are when you're working in-house. I'll open it up. Juliet, would you like to go first?
Thanks, Tom. So I think one of the key differences that you'll see if you are working in-house as opposed to private practice is that the size of the teams will be different. There are some large organisations, and Andrew works for a large organisation which has a very sizable legal team, it would sound. But increasingly, what you might well find is that legal teams consist of, say, 5 or 6 people. Which means that you then don't get that same level of support that can sit behind that as regards your professional support lawyers and potentially the personal assistance that you might have access to. I think there is then also one of the key differences will be how close you're able to get to the businesses that you support. Because you're in-house, you are seen as part of that team, and therefore the likelihood is you will have a closer working relationship than if you were in private practice. I think those are the key differences that I can see and would be aware of.
Great, thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, I agree with Juliet. I think I probably need to separate the litigation function in GLD when I answer this question, because I think the litigation function is a lot more like a private practice firm. So a litigation lawyer will have a number of different clients, so may have various different departments as their clients, and the litigation function sort of sits together, is located all together. So I suppose just speaking from the advisory side of things, the main difference, and again, I did private practice some time ago, so things may have changed a little bit in terms of collaboration, but we're co-located with our clients in the DFT building, and that tends to be the case for most advisory lawyers in government. There are a few exceptions to that, but so we work in the same building. Some of my clients are sitting 50 metres away from me. I can go and talk to them face to face. I can sit in meetings with them. I'm often sitting in meetings with ministers or very senior, Director General clients, speaking to them face to face, giving my advice to them orally rather than in an email. And I think that's one of the big parts of the differences as an in-house lawyer, that collaboration aspect, feeling part of the team. As I say, that things may have gotten better with private practice. They may be better at forming those sort of bonds, but I do find that most of my colleagues that have come in from a private practice background, they find it quite strange and a little bit intimidating to start with, that they are sitting so close to the clients are right there. Clients may come to their desk and to talk to them about something rather than picking up the phone. And it can be a little bit intimidating to start with, but I think they do feel very much like they're part of a team. That when they're making policy or advising on policy, they're part of a team that's driving something forward. They feel some real ownership in what's going on. And obviously the impacts of the work that we do can be seen quite easily in the community, certainly in transport. And so seeing the fruits of their labour, so to speak, can be a really positive thing. I think the only other point that I'd make is that I've just found that the risk appetite as a government lawyer, or the clients in government, is quite different to commercial or to corporate clients. One example of that was recently with the COVID pandemic. There was a very high risk appetite within ministers, as everyone probably saw. They were quite happy to take quite significant measures, and notwithstanding the risk of legal challenge. And so we had to adapt our advice in that regard. So what we might have said previously was high risk or medium high risk. We had to adapt and listen to the fact that ministers weren't really that worried about what the legal risks were. Their main goal was on trying to protect the community. So trying to adapt your advice on the fly to quite varying risk appetites is also a big part of certainly government in-house work.
Great, thank you. Javan, what are your thoughts on it and people that you've worked with in the past?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that you don't have to bill our time record, so that's the one big difference. I think, Andrew and Juliet have both touched on it. I think commerciality is probably the biggest difference, and I think that's probably what people from private practice struggle with the most. So the expectation is that it's not just about providing advice that is strictly about the law. The business will expect you to provide them with options. And again, it's as Andrew said, it'll be based on their risk appetite. Most places I've worked are quite commercial, so they have a high risk appetite. So it's about advising them on what the law says, and then maybe providing them with different options as to how they can reach their end goal, but with a lower risk attached to that. And I think it's about your personality and whether you can command a room. I think sometimes it's quite difficult. You will be dealing with directors who don't have a lot of time, will have other meetings blocked in, and sometimes you just need to have 10 minutes, 15 minutes with them, and you really need to hit your points home quite quickly. So I think commerciality is probably one of the big things. And if from people that I've worked with, so JD engaged with a lot of external law firms, one of the big things they said is that they quite like having the advice and then just sending it off and then not seeing it. Whereas in-house, you will send off that advice, but the expectation is probably that you will see, if it's a project in particular, that you will see it through and you will advise at different stages. So if that's not something you're particularly comfortable with, and you quite like just doing that work and then having nothing to do with it and moving on to the next client, I'd probably say in-house would be a bit of a change in that aspect. So
great, thank you. And Nick, what do you tend to see from?
Sorry, Tom, could I jump back in very quickly?
Yeah.
I think what Javan just said really resonated with me. I think that's one of the big points that, I think a good selling point is that I find that ministers, well, in private practice, the clients want to know what they can and can't do, or what they can't do more often than not, and the advice is given, and then they might make their decision. I think what we found, certainly recently with this current government, is they don't want to hear no. They want to hear what they can do and how, and they want lawyers to give them mitigations. They want lawyers to give them options. They don't want to hear no from lawyers. And it's a challenge because, I think lawyers, it's safe to say, well, you can't do that because it's high risk. And we've had to adapt very much to the current government who are, as I say, quite have a higher risk appetite, but the way that we've had to adapt our advice is to really give options. So not to say, can't do this, instead to say something like, this might be risky, but one way that you might avoid that risk would be to do X, Y, and Z. And so I've noticed even in the last 5 to 10 years that the way that we advise has changed radically. And I find it quite interesting, and we get a lot of challenge back from ministers directly, about this advice. And so there is that sort of conversation.
Yeah.
Great.
And just to echo that point, I'd say that it's not just in government. I don't work in government, but have worked for a number of large in-house practices and worked at director level and advising the boards of directors. And that's something that they increasingly want from their lawyers. So that's one of the points that may be a transition point. But I think one of the good things when you're going to an in-house practice that has in-house lawyers who've been there for a little while, they can help our private practice colleagues make that journey, because that was one of the things that I did when I've been working with lawyers that have moved from private practice. But increasingly just saying the legal issues are X, the risks are this amount of money or reputational damage, that really won't get you the credibility that helps you then progress through. It's a case of looking at what are the options and working collaboratively with other members of the team to find a solution that will enable the business to deliver on its objectives and then manage any risk back within its risk appetite.
Yeah, great. Nick, have you got anything to add on that as well?
I haven't actually, no. I was just going to say nothing to add from what the guys have said. I think what we hear is that in-house, that internal stakeholder management piece is huge. And as Javan said, how you apply the law, how you quote the law to these guys to make it a solution is what we hear. So can't add to that really. It was well answered.
Yeah, sounds good. I think the only thing I would add on to that is that we do hear some frustrations that people have in the in-house environment, and it's very much mirroring what you're saying. But if legal isn't respected, or it's not, it can be sometimes seen as a blocker in a business, and it'll find out late. So if there's a project or a commercial initiative, it won't come to legal until the last minute because the business is worried that they're going to say, no, you can't do that. It's not that way. Whereas actually what makes a really good in-house lawyer, or what success looks like for us and what we see, is when somebody goes, we might not be able to do it that way, but here's the solution. And that's that commerciality that I think everybody's talking about as well, being a business facilitator. So something to bear in mind. So we've had the results of the poll come in as well. So good to see the majority of the people want to make the move in-house within the next year. So 66% want to make the move in-house. 8.3% want to make it within the next 5 years, and 3 weren't sure. So hopefully we've gone some way towards giving enough information for those 3 people to either make their minds up that it's the right move or not the right move for them. Had just a couple of questions. So I did touch on them before, but we'll go back to them as well. So Shakiba asked, what is the specific requirement to move in-house? I don't know, Nick, do you want to take that from a recruitment perspective in terms of the UK legal market? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I suppose there's no one specific requirement. I think it's been touched on earlier that a majority of roles are commercial contracts focused. So, if you are interested in making the move in-house, that's probably an area you would need to have some experience in. It certainly would give you the best chance, because I don't have the figures, but must be over 80% of roles that are underpinned by contracts bias, particularly in the private sector, in terms of what's done. So I assume we're working for a position here if someone's qualified.
I'm assuming the same.
But further to that, I think best chance would be commercial contracts focused. But there are some other specific areas we touched upon before, around construction, corporate, employment, whereby there are requirements. So if that's a preference of yours in the room, it really just depends on what you like doing. But if it's just a general move in-house, I would say best bet is commercial contracts.
Does anyone disagree? Anyone got anything else to add to that? No.
I don't disagree. I think what Nick said is correct. I think the majority of roles are a general commercial, but as I kind of said earlier, I am seeing more, especially for the bigger organisations. So I'm talking for your FTSE 250s, maybe your FTSE 100s, which there maybe is less of in the Northwest. They are looking for corporate lawyers. They're looking for competition lawyers. They're looking for antitrust, which JD has just been out for recently, or they're looking for senior tech. So it's not an absolute prerequisite, and I wouldn't say there are any specific requirements. I think it's key that you do your homework and make sure that wherever you're applying for suits your experience or where you see your future. But other than that, I think, as long as you've got the right attitude, as Andrew mentioned earlier, I think that goes a long way. I think your attitude and personality and how you carry yourself in an in-house role will help you massively.
Right. Andrew, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so it's probably a bit different from the government legal side of things. So in terms of requirements, you would be applying to be a civil servant. So you're going through that selection process as well as the legal selection process. So there's obviously legal qualifications are a must. In terms of professional qualifications, as I said, it's possible for people to apply to permanently for a GLD permanent position without having sat there. I should remember the names of these things, but I never had to do them myself. But the legal professional skills, whatever it's called, I can't remember. Sorry. So there is the opportunity to secure a place with GLD on the basis that you will complete those qualifications in slower time. But I think there's a 3-year time limit or something like that. But I think the important thing to say is that you would be applying to be a civil servant. So it wouldn't just be the legal skills that was at the forefront. There would be there are other issues that you need to think about. So you need to look at the application form for that. But I certainly don't think that there's any limit on the type of lawyer that we're looking for within GLD. We're just looking for people who are keen to join the public service, to do public, to make a difference, and there's various different areas you can move into once you've been selected.
Great. Hope that answers your question, Shakiba. If not, please feel free to add something to it, and we'll try and answer that as well. And Anuradha, I mentioned this one before, but she's added a little bit more context to it, which is great. So why are many in-house roles contracts procurement based? Is this the case with many in-house roles? But she's gone on to say contracts, in her opinion, is a dry area. It requires tons of experience and patience to like it. So would you agree?
I'll speak first on that one.
Right.
What I'd say is, like all areas, it's not for everybody, but I think the mindset that you approach a contract with can really change it. I wanted to be a litigator and was adamant. I'd done a number of placements. It was the thing I wanted to do, secured my training contract on the basis I'd have greater rights of audience as a trainee. However, what I found was, even when I won and was successful, the fact that I didn't get all of my costs back kind of stuck in my throat. And one of the things that I found with contracts was it was a great way to get involved in lots of projects within the business. Contracts will underpin near enough most activity that a business will be looking to undertake, whether it's partnering with another organisation, whether it's sponsoring a TV campaign. Basically, it underpins so much. But if you're then looking at this is a way to achieve an objective and to help the business deliver, it was a way that contracts for me became a very interesting area. And it wasn't an area I initially thought that I'd enjoy. But from that, I've got to say, I've absolutely loved working on contracts. The projects it's enabled me to take part in have varied from launching an international brand, launching brands in Europe, dealing with rationalisation projects where we were then outsourcing. So for me, as you can probably hear, I don't see contracts as being dry. If you look at them on the basis it's enabling the business to achieve its objectives and to crystallise where the risks might sit and to try and resolve issues before they become a real live issue for the business at the stage that everybody's happy and wanting to work together, I think it becomes an interesting area. It does require patience and review, I would say that. If you're somebody who doesn't really have that much attention to detail, I'd say contracts is maybe not necessarily an area that you'll enjoy and excel at.
Great. Thanks, Juliet.
Go on, Andrew, I'll let you go next.
I'm going to agree with Anuradha. I'm not a fan of contract law, so I'm not going to try and big it up. But I can say that I think it is. It's a skill set, and it's some people that really it's like a duck to water. One thing I would say is that I've had two colleagues in GLD who ended up doing some commercial contracts work. Unexpectedly, wasn't really something they were looking to do. But both of them have now moved in-house outside GLD as a result of the skill set that they gained while they were with GLD. So I think it can open up lots of doors if you get the opportunity to do contract work and you enjoy it.
Great. Javan, anything to add?
I kind of agree and disagree, to be honest. So I agree in terms of I worked in telecommunications for 2 years, and it got to a point where I did find some of the contracts quite dry in terms of it's very goods based and it's kind of just you run of the mill. You know, I'm doing AV solutions, I'm doing solution installs, internet installation, etc. So that wasn't particularly exciting for me. So one of the key things I felt was that I needed to be in a sector that really interested me, and that's why I chose retail, and that's why I've ended up at JD. So for me personally, I've done a contract for Anthony Joshua, I've done a contract for Chunks. You know, those are current interest in sports sponsorships. I've done one for Crystal Palace. You know, it really just varies and it depends on where you work. So I would say, again, kind of it's the do your homework point. I think it depends where you work, and you need to have a bit of a passion and an interest in where you work. And if you have a passion and an interest, you'll just find the contracts just much more enjoyable to review, to read, to analyse, to discuss with your stakeholder. So I think it just depends.
Yeah, right. I'd just add as well, Anuradha, the first point of your question in terms of why are many of them in-house contracts or procurement-based. Yeah, it's been touched on there. The majority or the bulk are, but there are some out there that aren't necessarily just commercial contracts as well. So hopefully, previously the guys were talking about litigation roles and construction roles or employment roles, that there are different types of opportunities out there as well. So if that's the thought process, don't let it stop you if you think that there's other opportunities that you'd like to get involved in as well. We've had one last question in from Laura, who's asked, how do you deal with clients challenging the advice, and how do you persuade them to follow your advice? Going on from that.
I'm happy to jump in here. I think it's a really good question, Laura. I've had this discussion with a couple of junior lawyers in the last week. I'm not sure that it is our job to persuade our clients to follow our advice. I think our job is to give them our advice, to tell them what our advice is. By all means, if they challenge us and we think that there's more that we can add or that we can clarify to ensure that they understand the advice, then that's absolutely what we need to do. And sometimes we need to have quite frank and difficult conversations with clients to make our advice clear. But ultimately, we act for them. They are the client. They make the decisions, and as long as we're making clear to them the risks of any decision that they make, or the potential repercussions or consequences of the decisions that they make, the decision is really ultimately for them. So I don't see my job as sort of digging my heels in and over the advice that I give. I give it as best as I can. I clarify anything that needs to be clarified, and then it's for the client to make their decision.
Great.
Yes, just there to Andrew's point. For me, the key bit is understanding what aspect the client is challenging. Is it that the client doesn't understand the advice? Because the key point is making sure that the client understands the advice and therefore can make a decision based upon that advice. So it isn't necessary that the client will follow our advice. And I think one of the things that you can find when you're in-house is that clients don't necessarily follow the advice, but our role is to make sure that they understand the advice and that they're aware of the impacts it could have, and that is then signed off at the appropriate level. So that's the additional point that I'd add to Andrew's point there.
Great. Thanks, Juliet. Javan, anything to add?
I think it is difficult. I think how you deal with it depends on the individual that you're dealing with. How senior are they? So it may be that you have, so for example, at JD, I might have someone who's quite junior, like a junior buyer merchandiser that clearly doesn't want to follow the advice, but I'm fully aware that if that was raised to their manager or a director level, actually, they would take it with a bit more severity. When I worked at Trafford, interestingly, so I was kind of doing procurement for around about 18 months. It was quite clear in what you could and couldn't do in terms of procuring a contract and whether that would be a breach of the regulations or not. So at those instances, we would make it clear that you can't award in a particular way because it will get challenged, and then we have to do a full review after that and then basically go back out to procure anyway. But I think it's about how maybe you present the advice sometimes as well, to Juliet's point, and understanding how somebody might receive that advice in the way that you want them to take it. So sometimes it might be drafting it a bit softer or in a bit plainer language for them to kind of fully understand what it is that you're trying to say. So I think it's a mixture of things, but it can be difficult. You do just get sometimes people that just don't want to listen to what you have to say and kind of just ignore it. And at the end of the day, all you can do is advise them on it. And if they don't follow it, then you have to be there to pick up the pieces afterwards. But sometimes it is just a case of, well, I've told you what you should be doing, so that's up to you.
Yeah.
Tom, if I could, I'll just jump back in just to clarify one point. From a government legal point of view, if something is clearly unlawful, so if there's no reasonable argument or respectable argument that could be made if challenged, we would make that point to ministers or to senior clients. If they continue to proceed down that route, we wouldn't necessarily spend a lot of time trying to persuade them, but we would need to inform the law officers, so the Attorney General and the Solicitor General, and they would need to give their given advice on the point. So just to clarify that advice, the ministers don't just run off and do whatever they want to do, but if there's a respectable legal argument to be made, i.e. we could go into court and make an argument that might be really duff, but is respectable, it's not completely beyond the realms of reality, then we just have to let the ministers get on with it, as long as they, as Juliet said, as long as they understand our advice and the possible risks.
Great. Thanks, everyone. hopefully that answers your question, Laura. I think that pretty much wraps things up, unless we get any last dash questions. But just wanted to say thank you to everyone on the panel for taking part and answering some questions, and hopefully everyone watching's found that informative and helpful. And if there are any questions, I think feel free to connect with Nick or I on LinkedIn, and I don't know, Juliet or Javan. I'm sure the legal community is small. Everyone's always happy to provide advice and let people know the best way going forward. Don't think you're on LinkedIn, are you, Andrew? So you might be a bit more difficult to reach on that front. But any questions, feel free to get in touch, everyone. And yeah, thank you. Nice to see everyone.
Yes, that's great. So if anybody has got any questions, you can either send them via Tom or Nick. I'm happy to answer. The reason that I came in-house was the fact that people took the time to share with me the benefits as well as the potential downsides, such that I was in a position to be able to make the decision about what was right for me.
Great, thanks.
Tom, I should just say I am on LinkedIn. I hope. I thought I was. But,
Okay.
Yeah. So I should be there.
That's a bad recruiter who can't find you.
If anyone has any questions about GLD, then I'm very happy to answer.
Great.
Good stuff.
Thanks, everyone.